Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Today we're going to take a look at the latest GMT game purchase that I made called Tank Duel. Tank Duel is a 1 to 8 player game which simulates the fervor and combat and just the crazy battlefield of the Eastern Front in World War II. In this game, 1 to 8 players can control a tank, one tank at a time, one limit per customer, and they will then achieve, without the benefit of any map at all, a tank battle between the Russians and the Germans in World War II. Let's just get into the components and talk about it.
Okay, let's take a look and see what's inside the box of Tank Duel. First off, you get the always all-consuming powerful player aids. There are 8 of these, I believe, 8, since there's up to 8 players, unheard of. Each one, it's actually a lot of this is pretty much the game in a nutshell, very well detailed. And of course, the list of things you can do for tank action, so you can be thankful for that. And then you have the rules of play. Relatively thin, actually quite thin. And then, of course, you have the consummate playbook that has both solo and regular play examples inside, as well as the list of scenarios and optional variants and rules. Did I mention there's a player aid? Cool. Did I mention it again? How about now? There's 8 of these. All right, so each player will get a tank, and so you're going to see these nice, very sturdy, stocked tank cards. Both sides have different tanks on them, so you could flip it over. I'm not going to do that and spill the pieces. And pretty much everything you need to do, this is sort of your master control for everything about the tank you're going to need to do, deal with, and adapt, and mess with. You have move and fire levels. These are used for moving and firing levels, basically, that they interact with the cards. You have a terrain, so whatever terrain you're on is going to be here, or movement. You might be in moving mode too. You have your crew. You have some additional armor. You have your range track. You have basically everything you need to know about playing the game once you get rolling is pretty much on here. Damage reference card is handy for damage, and you're gonna take damage. This track is multi-purpose. It can be used for move and fire levels. It's also used for tracking victory points, etc. You get some spotting counters, or some flanking counters, sorry. These are for when you flank someone, you chuck it at them and say, flank you. And these are spotting counters. You place them here. When you've spotted different tanks, they've optimized it quite well, so you're only going to have the amount of chits that you need, since for this scenario there's only 2 enemy tanks, so there's only need for 2 spotter tokens. That's it. Everyone gets a similar layout, and then we go to the next thing, which is the heart of the matter, which is these battle cards. The shuffle card and the game in card get shuffled in during the course of the game. These tank cards pretty much give you a lot of options. This is where the bulk of your actions come from firing. You can fire, you can have these leadership, gives you kind of special bonuses you could do. Moving, you want to move, flanking, buildings, terrain, so there's different terrains, and you can play these in combinations. Some of them you only play one at a time, some you have to play in a combination, but there's 100 cards in here in the base deck, and you'll notice these cards have a lot of different things on them. There's numbers that matter here for certain situations, icons that matter for things. You can move, you can this one you can slap mud on an opponent, you can fire at them, like during damage resolution and initiative. There's just a bunch of stuff. Each card is chocked full of things that will be utilized, because this is not just a deck of cards for you to use for actions, it's also the game counter. So as you exhaust cards here, and you will exhaust them quite rapidly, because you'll be pulling cards. They call it pulling cards to check this, pulling cards to check, pulling cards to do this and that, and then giving that. It looks like a big deck, but it actually goes by rather quickly when you're in the middle of battle and people are just pulling cards to get a status check. They take the place of dice, basically. Here we also have damage cards, which will happen when you do finally get hit with damage. These damage cards, which are pretty nasty, going to come at you. There's a bunch of different extra cards for different things, different scenarios, have different cards you're going to pull in and pull out. You'll always have a 100-card deck, but you might pull out certain cards and replace them with the same numbered cards. On Fire and Broken are two states that you're going to have when you're playing this game. Here's the extra pieces, all of which map to up to 8 players. There's some extra variants. You have infantry variants, etc. Pretty much your standard fare. Of course, a completely irrelevant playbook. All right, that's the components. Now let's get on to an example of play. Okay, we're going to go over an example of play. It's not going to be exhaustive. This is not a playthrough. I'm looking forward to seeing lots of playthroughs of this game over time. But for now, we're just going to show you a little bit of how it works. We have our 2 Russian tanks against our 2 German tanks. Each player at the start was given a certain amount of battle cards. Commensurate with the context of the situation they're in. Now, for example, you always get 4 cards. Always get 4 cards. Well, to start with, as a base. And then you add cards for each tank you control. Since we're going to simulate a 4-player game as if all 4 players or tanks were being run by humans, we get an extra 2 cards for each tank, so that leads it up to 6. Now, if you have an elite crew, and there is an elite crew here, then there's an extra card, so that's a nice little advantage. None of the others are elite, so they did not get that advantage. If you are on Fire or Broken, you are going to lose a card for each of those 2 states. If you have a green crew, you're going to lose a card, and if you have a dead commander, you're going to lose a card. So during the course of the game, you're going to get a fluctuating amount of cards to deal with. What do these battle cards do? Many, many things. Each one of these is, as I showed in the sort of the components list, has some opportunity or thing that they do, whether it's moving or terrain, if you're going to go into terrain, firing. Those are the basic ones. There's leadership, etc. And of course in the command cards. So everybody has some of these, and at the start, you're going to decide which one of these you want to use for initiative. Now, when you use it for initiative, you are basically throwing it away for any other purpose. The initiative card is used just to go, who gets to go first, which isn't always what you want. And so, in each of these 4 cases, I have gone through and laid out the initiative cards on these mats to say, okay, everyone kind of does this. They kind of pick their 4 cards, they lay them out, and then you flip them over, and based on the number, in this case, it's 61. In this case, it's 62. In this case, it's 85. And finally, 94. And you go in crescendoing order. Lowest to highest battle number. So guess what? We get to go first. And so we're going to take our turn as the T-34 76 M43, number 1. We are 800 meter, range is 800. There is no spatial terrain, there's no map, so basically you're going by pure abstraction of ranges. 800 to 800. It's assumed that they're on opposite sides of the battlefield, so as time goes by, you'll start off at 800, they're at 800, that's a 1600 meter differential. So if it comes to firing, you know you're going to have a very low chance of hitting them and very poor penetration when you do. As time goes by, as you move, you're going to be getting closer and closer to the center of the battlefield. You can even flip over and then start going on their side of the battlefield and get even closer in range. Why would you do that? Many different reasons. Some of the scenarios actually have a sort of a king of the hill concept where you want to be as close to the center so that you can get victory points every turn. Think King of Tokyo with tanks. So, first thing we do is, on our turn, is take that, toss it. We don't need it. That initiative is done. Second, you score any specific VPs, which we don't have yet. Then, you do checks. Am I on fire? No. Is my morale broken? No. Then you get to do your action step, and this is where it gets interesting. Based on the cards that you have, and I'm going to lay them out here to explain in a little more detail, we have opportunities. We could straight up, you play 1 to 3 cards. Now what determines which cards? This nice little handy sheet will help us out. If you play, so for example, leadership card, you're playing 1 card only. If you're playing a fire card, you can also play a leadership card for a bonus. If you're playing a move, you can also play flank or terrain cards afterwards for their corresponding bonuses. If you flat out just want to flank, you can do that and then add terrain bonus after, unless you can see the rest of these are all things you can do. The Instruct Crew is sort of a catch-all at the end, where you can just ditch a card to do any number of these things, or take a chance to do any number of these things. That's kind of like the miniature actions. You also get field actions, and field actions are interesting because you only get one tank action per turn, so only one of these bold-faced actions is possible per turn, but you can do a lot of field actions, and these are sort of auxiliary things you can do. You can play command cards, that's a specific type, and they do special bonuses, whatever's on the card. You can play terrain cards on enemy tanks. That would be good if you want to like try and slap a mud terrain on a tank and slow them down, or at least leave them open to fire. You can discard any battle card to stop moving. That's a handy one because certain cards definitely hit you harder when you're moving than when you're not. And then the scenario-specific ones. And then obviously if you have optional gameplay, we're not getting into that, but you have infantry and anti-tank guns and some other variants that you can do. And that's pretty cool. You also have order icons, which is a little bit of an interesting thing. You'll notice that some of these have icons on them. If you're on fire, these icons, you can discard cards with these icons to put the fire out automatically before your turn starts. If not, you can discard a lesser amount of icons during your turn. It will cost you the ability to do more things in your turn, but you can still put the fire out. You can also discard a certain number of these to raise your fire level 1 or 2. That's handy if you're basically been damaged, you have a fire rating, but you have a card that needs to have a fire number higher than what you've got. You might be able to just temporarily boost it, but at the cost of using other cards. A lot of stuff can be done in a lot of different variety of ways. So, with that, let's get on to decide what we're going to do. Now, because we're so far away, we want to know, do we approach and try and get into the middle? Because if the first one starts moving and you're moving and you don't get into terrain, that's not very good. We have woods. That's all we got. So we could move into the woods. We can do that. We can't fire. I mean, if we tried to fire a weapon now, we would stay far back. But there really isn't a good chance to hit right now. So let's just go with a fire move. Just all of this is indicative of someone who's playing while talking, so don't expect any masterful moves, and do not use this as a strategy for actually playing the game for real. I'm going to move 4. My fire level is high enough that that's going to matter. And then I'm going to go into the woods, and I think that's all I'm going to do. So with that, I'm going to move up to 200 meters. If flanked, and I'm not, you can pull a battle card to remove a flank. So I'm going to move. Yay! Am I going to move closer? I am. I'm going to move closer. I want to get a little bit more in range. Now the tanks are 8 and 6 is 1400. That beefs me up a little bit in my ability to get in and fire. I could play 2 moves if I wanted to and just make a nice big rush to get towards the middle, but I'm really not interested in just rushing forward, given that after I play my turn, the next person to play is going to be an enemy, and they might want to just shoot at me, and I'm basically giving them the opportunity to do so. So, because I've done this, I have these effects that happen. I am spotted. I moved. So now everybody gets to see me. I'm tank 1. Everybody on the enemy side sees me. That lets them fire. I actually couldn't have just fired right off the bat, now that I think of it, because I didn't have anybody spotted. I'm the first one spotted, so I made the right choice by moving. Otherwise it would be illegal and there would be sadness. Now, we've done the move, so if that was all we were going to do, we would stay there. We would be in motion, which is not always good, although there is some advantages. I mean, it's harder to hit when you're in motion. But there's also some things that can happen that can slap you down. I would rather hide in the woods. So I'm going to play this. Conceal 30. Now, I'm going to grab a card. If that card is less than or equal to my conceal, then I am going to be concealed. Not congealed, concealed. It is 77. So, nope, I am not concealed. But that's okay. I'm still spotted, but I'm now in terrain, natural terrain. And that means that I have extra cover if they fire on me, and I have an opportunity for a hold down condition, which means that even if they hit me, all they can hit is the turret, which is a nice way to sort of protect yourself a little bit. And that's it. That's basically the turn in a nutshell. So then I'm allowed to discard 1 battle card. If I'm not in the red zone, In the red zone, you get a little bit of a beef up because you're taking a risk, so the game sort of gives you a little extra to to compensate for the fact that you're getting perilously close to the middle of the battlefield. So in this case, I want my fire 1, my fire 2. These are cool. I'm hoping to be able to use these. The command, does the move matter? Nah, not really. So I'm going to go ahead and ditch it. I'm going to ditch it. And now I have my 3 cards left. Yay, now it's the next player's turn. And that would be, let's see, 85, 94, 62. 62. So now the enemy gets a chance to move. And when I say enemy, I don't mean, yeah, it's an enemy. All right, so discard the card. Again, no victory points, no smoke, no fire, nothing like that. But I do have a chance to decide what I want to do. And interestingly enough, I have some interesting times. I have move galore. I too could move into the woods. I also have tactics, so if I get fired on, that's going to give me a little boost to my defense. Or I could just flat out fire. I only have 1. This is a multi-purpose card. I can move, or this gives me an extra thing that I could fire. Now, right now, I don't know which. I kind of would want to move into the woods, but I'm not going to because I'm going to show you what it's like to fire. So, I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to play this for the fire. It is unwise, I think, in the general scheme of things, but because I'm just showing you how it works, I'm going to do that. Now, I have spotted tank 1, so this is the only tank I can attack because there is no spotting of this tank yet. It's still a ways away. So we're going to go through that. We declare the target, and that is this move. It would be handy to have some leadership cards or some bonus cards, but I don't. And then I figure out, based on the distance, what the base hit number is. So we are 1,400 yards away. And hopefully my math comes out right in this. So 51. 51 is our base number. Now we start going through modifiers. 51 is the base modifier. I don't have any leadership cards. I don't get a bonus for that. I haven't acquired the target yet. When you repeatedly fire at a tank and you don't change targets, you can get an extra bonus for continually trying. It just means you're acquiring them, you're narrowing in on them. Plus 10 if the target is flanked. It's not flanked yet. They have little flank tokens you can choose to flank. Who knew flanking was so easy and so abstract? And so if you flank them, then you get a bonus there. And then you have a plus or minus hit modifier from terrain or smoke or movement cards or whatever. So we look here and we go, we had 51 and covers 10, so 41. 41, subtract the cover from the terrain. Yep. And then the size mod 41 minus 5. These tanks are always a little harder to fit. So that would be 51. 41, 36. Ooh, it's gonna be a lucky shot. And no tactics card played. So, did I get that right? So 51, 41, 36. 36 is the number to hit. Okay, let's pretend we roll it, and no, didn't quite do it. Close, but no cigar. We didn't hit. Should we go over if we actually did? What if we actually did hit the card? Oh, wow. What if we actually got a card that gave us a hit? Yeah, that would have taken a while, wouldn't it? All right. So there we go. Let's do 29. So pretend that we got a hit. If there is a hit, and obviously this is a classic example not to just fire at long range like a Tim, like a harebrained games man, then you figure out the location. I didn't play 2 fire cards, so I don't get to pick. Instead, I'm going to pull a battle card to determine the hit location. And I'm going to look at this number here. It's a 6. And the 6 maps to the turret, so I've hit it in the turret. I've hit the turret. All right. So I've hit the turret. That's the hit location. Yeah, actually, no. That just tells you what location. We haven't decided if we penetrated it or not. That's another phase of the game. So first off, we determine the value. So was it turret? The turret's value from the front. It's not flanked, and so it's gonna hit front end. So 6 is the penetration value. Oh, I'm an idiot. That's not how it works. 7 is the penetration value. The hit location is the turret. That's it. Yeah. So That's the defense. Never mind, I'm getting it. Hate talking and chewing gum at the same time. So 7. 7 is our penetration value for the offensive. On the defensive, we can look, and it's the turret, and its armor is 9. So penetration 6, armor 9. That's not particularly handy, but we're not done yet. 6 to 9. If I pull this card and it's a 3 in its penetration value, or a P, then it's automatically penetrated. That's one of the, hey, no matter what happens, you've penetrated it. That's rare. But hey, you got a hit. And not only did you hit for heavy damage. Ouch. So there's always a chance that you can hit. It's just you play the numbers a little better than I've done. So we actually hit it in this fake representation of a battle. Now what do? We pull a damage card. And that damage card tells us all we need to know. We check to see if the number, oh my gosh, if the number here matches this number, then nothing else matters. You've done a critical hit, and that's bad. In this case, we did. The 0 number matches that 0 number. If it had been any other number, then we would have gone to the turret, I believe, whichever one we had, and then went to heavy damage, and then killed the loader and wounded the gunner, done an explosion, and also caused a fire. yeah, you don't want to get hit in a tank if you can help it. These are some nasty stuff. Instead, this one you get optics damaged, gunner and leader wounded, which really isn't as bad. Huh, interesting. Okay, well, that's the damage part, and so let's say the gunner is damaged. The loader is also wounded. They're not dead yet, but if they do take other hits, they will be dead. And if they have to jump out of the tank, then they pull extra battle cards to see if they die or not. So that's not so good. And then optics damage has an effect that will change what you're allowed to do. I'll read up on it. Yeah, so your file level is permanently reduced to 3. Ouch. So yeah, that's not looking good for this tank. It got hit hard. Tank may no longer acquire enemy tanks. So yeah, that was a pretty nasty pretend hit that happened on this case. But in general, that's kind of how the game flows. I'm giving you just an example. I'm not doing a full playthrough, like I said. I'm just kind of showing what you do. And that's a series of what goes on. Now what's going to happen is next we'll have this tank go on, and then this tank will take its turn, and when that's done, then there's reinforcements. If tanks have gotten killed off, you just take the victory points. For example, yeah, you earned victory points for killing off crew. So you'll see here that if you take out an entire vehicle, it's 3. If you take out a commander, it's 5. If you take out any other member of the crew here, it's 2. And they vary in victory points. You'll see for this tank that you get a different range of victory points. If you take out a whole tank, that's a whole pile of victory points right away. And so you're going to be going back and forth trying to damage, destroy, earn victory points, etc., etc. Like I said, during the reinforcement phase, if you lost a tank, another one just comes up and you just keep going with it. And you play through a certain amount of rounds of this. This battle deck card is going to go flying by. It is a timer. It is a very good timer. And at a certain point, over halfway through the deck, you're going to wind up with the shuffle card, and that says, okay, when you're done with this, so shuffle around and do it again. The amount of times you go through this deck is determined by the amount of players, or I guess you could just decide on your own. At the last shuffle, instead, you do the game end card, and when you see that, the game is over, tally the points, and whoever won. Again, this is a very, very nominal demonstration of the gameplay example, but hopefully it's at least a base understanding of how you would go about playing it, and how you would probably not choose to fire the way I did, because anyway, let's get to my final thoughts on Tank Duel. Enemy in the crosshairs.
All right, let's talk about Tank Duel. What do we think of Mr. Tank Duel? Is it duly noted? Is it given undue attention? Okay, puns aside, let's actually talk about it for real. What do I think of Tank Duel? Let's go over the cons first, because that's usually how I roll. I would say that the only niggle, there's a physical con where the thick, mighty tank boards, The first games I didn't tell, but over the course of the games they started to slightly warp over time. I didn't expect that. I did quite a few things to try to flatten them and get them flattened. I'm going to try some other creative things too to try to just get them to stay flat. It's not bad, but it's just it was surprising. It's actually, it doesn't inhibit gameplay at all. Just something to keep in mind. The other thing is, if you were there is mental creativity required for this game. There is no board. There's no, everything's going on in your collective minds. Abstraction is pronounced on certain things, certain core elements of the game, spotting, flanking, are you on a hill? These are all abstracted away if you were expecting more of a miniature style game. I'm not going to lie, there was a part of me that kind of wanted even just a representative sort of spatial thing to look at early on. Not just it's a expectation setting thing more than it's a con. If you need tracking of every single detail, this game does 90% of it. There's a small amount that you have to kind of remember who hit who killed who, Hardy and Vicker. And honestly, the only other thing is that I really liked the scenarios in the game. I wish that I would love to see more. I think they're well thought out. I would love to see more like a Talon 1000 for Tank 1000 kind of thing. But I expect, hopefully, given what I would hope to be great popularity for this game, that there will be additional enhancements along the way. And really the meat of the experience is the actual duel portion itself. So enough of my measly cons, let's get to the pros. Even though there was that slight warping, the components they're thick, they're sturdy. The big thick tank boards just feel right, like armor plating, despite the slight bowing. The manual, whoever wrote this manual seriously needs to quit their day job. It's top notch. It's concise. It's pristinely organized. There are a scattering of questions, but just comparatively minuscule compared to some other game manuals I've read in the past. So whoever really did the manual, like, do more. Art, I love the artwork entirely. I just love it. And this is usually when you see cards or you're playing cards, I usually have kind of a gripe, or if they don't use enough of the card for art, I feel like I got robbed a little bit. Certain cards are like, oh man, you just use this part of it. Why didn't you use the whole part? This game is one of the few games where the tiny portholes make absolute sense. It's got this gorgeous hand-drawn art in these portholes, and it's intentionally meant to give you that feel of claustrophobia. Like you're in a tank and you're looking out of a tank. It's brilliant to kind of do it that way. So even though the art is small, it makes perfect thematic sense here. And the clever use of cards. Like Fields of Fire, the cards are kind of a Swiss Army knife of disparate motivations. You use them for initiative, you use them for your actions, you use them for battle computation, for damage results. They're a game time, etc., etc. It's very reminiscent of Fields of Fire and Fields of Fire 2, and even like Australia is another game that kind of uses cards that removes the need for dice and repurposes the cards in a unique way. Plus, it's a constantly turning clock, like it's a basketball clock, shot clock winding down when you're taking these cards. So very clever, very clever. I would love to continue to see that kind of thing modeled. And speaking of modeling of chaos and control is, I think, fine-tuned. You maneuver, you hide, you fire, you get exposed, you lay down smoke, you stay at a distance, do you rush for the high ground? There's a risk, there's a reward, there's a chaos of lining up your shots, missing, getting stuck in the mud or adverse terrain, getting flanked. There's critical decisions made at every turn. The other thing is damage here is two-phased, but it's nasty. You have the I'm firing on you. Did I hit you? Did I hit you? Did I penetrate you? If I penetrated you, how much damage did I do? I mean, when you're done, when you finally get through all that, you feel like you had a job well done. And damage is not pretty. It is just not pretty. Occasionally you get lucky, and occasionally you lose it all. Yeah, like it is. I mean, Tank Duel is sort of it is a tank version of a high-stakes poker game, except you ante up all of your chips, and only the results of the aggressor's card play determines how many of those chips you get back, if any, if you lose. And that's what I love. The other thing is the narrative that your tank is just one tank in this huge battle going on really helps set the right focus. It gives perfect explanation for why you could lose your entire tank and have it knocked out, and then and then just sort of reset the next round, because you're not, you and the tank are not one. It's like you're using this tank, take it as far as you can, try not to make it into a victory point farm for the opponent, and then if it gets lost or they have to abandon it, then off you go, you grab another tank, everything's gone in this big battle. And once you have your mindset like that, everything kind of falls into place thematically. Yeah, you lose face in the form of victory points, but you aren't like knocked out of the game. This isn't like bang the tank game. And finally, I have to say as a side note, the system itself, the way that the system works and how everything kind of feels like this big, just raging war, this mechanized firefight, really seems tappable in other ways. I mean, it almost made I started thinking of ways you could do sea battles with, huge ships. Since like Merchants and Marauders Broadside was a game that sort of fizzled, but the idea was just you have the tank battles going, or not tank battles, but the battles going on with these huge galleons and all that. And I was just thinking, could you repurpose this for sea battles, or even space battles with big starships and stuff? Just as a side note, I think the system itself is worthy of continuing to tap, because I think there's a lot of potential for it. So, in summary, I've noticed that in the last two games I bought from GMT, Ancient Civilization of the Inner Sea and now Tank Duel, they're curious and very well-received entrants for me in the GMT lineup. They have unique attributes of being right in the middle between simple and complex. I mean, if GMT ever did a series, these two games would fit in kind of I'd call it a heat of battle series, where you have the complexity of their more complex fare, but you start off right in it. You're like right into it from day one. When you start Tank Battle, you're battling right away. You don't have a build-up. You don't have this sort of setting the stage. There's none of this ramp-up, none of that. You're in it. Same with Ancient Civilizations. Like when you start, you could beeline across the map and get into it. Same thing with Tank Duel. You're into the heat of battle. You're progressively learning, the rules, and they do naturally flow. If you think about how a tank battle goes, they naturally flow. And this is the odd thing, because if you told me, like, before I picked this up, that there was a tank game out there that didn't have any map, I would be very dubious, because I'm used to the Memoir 44, Tide of Iron kind of things, where you need that sort of spatial representation, even though I did say I missed it a little bit, but I don't really miss it as a core thing here. I would have had concerns that it would be too big a gap to overcome, but it's not. I'm impressed with how well Tank Duel manages to pull off a tank battle in our minds. It feels in our minds. The cards tell the story, and what stories they tell. I would encourage anyone who was interested to read some of the session reports that have come out, or even just the general chit-chat, and you'd think there'd been a full war going on with a big battle map and a bunch of people standing over it in the middle kind of affair, but it wasn't. It was all an abstraction in the mind. Impressive is an understatement for how I feel they were able to pull that off in a way that I think has lots of lasting power. In some ways, it kind of reminds me of, one of my favorite experiences of tanks was back in 1989. Microprose put out a video game, M1 Tank Platoon, and I played that thing for so long, way too long, got in lots of trouble. Should have done my chores. But that kind of I feel the same suspense, the jockeying, the slow motion cat and mouse, it's all there in this game. And there are a lot of tank simulations out there. Some are really complex. Some are, like I say, Memoir 44 kind of games and stuff. But this one, Tank Duel, just hits a niche all its own. I'd highly recommend it to anybody who wants a middle-of-the-road sort of tank duel affair that can really fit 1 to 8. And I'm looking forward to a lot more of Tank Duel in the future and a lot more expansions. Hint, hint, hint. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.